Hey everyone, Scott here to discuss The Newton Boys, starring Matthew McConaughey, Skeet Ulrich, Ethan Hawke, Vincent D'Onofrio, and Juliana Margulies, directed by Richard Linklater. Now, I've never seen this movie as this is going to be my first two viewings, so let's get straight into it. We open the movie with Newton, played by Matthew McConaughey, coming home from prison in the 1920s. I think it's 22, but I forget. But anyways, let's move on. As he's seeing two of his four brothers, Jess, played by Ethan Hawke, and Joe, played by Skeet Ulrich, from Scream, they test horses. And yes, I forgot to bring up, this is a Western, and they get inside and see their mother, and she gives them lunch as Willis misses her cooking and has some delicious food and take it from someone who really is into westerns. This may be director Richard Linklater's least interesting film, as I have problems, and I swear this movie is supposed to be a true story, and this whole time I was thinking that's a joke, right? When the audience gets to the end of the film, we actually learn that it is a true story, which shocked the hell out of me. And again, I'm not a fan of westerns, and this movie proves to me why. Willis robs a bank with a couple of other men and gets chased down by a couple of people with guns. And remember, this movie's taking place in Texas, as it's legal to have a gun in that state. And Willis escapes without getting caught, and he goes to Brentwood Glasscock, played by Dwight Yoakam, and his wife Alvis. And I actively dislike the characters, as they're not interesting, but and they never learned a damn thing, as they're robbing one place to the next, to the next, to the next, as that felt very irritating. Willis sees from a distance Louise Brown, played by Juliana Margulies, as he looks into robbing the town's banks and look for a hiding spot, and that happens to be where she works at which is I believe a hotel, as it looks safe. And the cinematography in this movie is absolutely dry, as this movie is dry. Willis invites Jess and Joe as they become a gang again by robbing banks like they were in the past, and again, these people are really unlikable from start to finish. And there were times, because I watched this on Apple TV, that the movie might have been broken, because there were times the movie wasn't in sync, and that was bothering me for half the movie. They rob a bank, and an elderly lady sounds a siren at 2 o'clock in the morning because she heard a kaboom and yells they're robbing the bank next to her house. And they get out while Jess shoots at some civilians, but not dead, and he meets Louise, and by he I mean Willis meets Louise for the first time at the hotel and chats with her for a little bit after she closes up her station and disguises his name as Will Reed. And I usually like Matthew McConaughey in any movie, but he's in, but unfortunately, this is my least favorite movie I've reviewed him in. While Louise has a son named Lewis, and she goes to dinner with Arthur Adams, as he doesn't like her smoking, and they don't have chemistry in my opinion. The fourth brother, Doc, played by Vincent D'Onofrio, acts like he's the law while he's just playing around, and they're having fun with each other. And Willis takes Louise and Lewis to the picture show to see a film, and they have a good time with each other. And based on the performances, I'm not buying it at this point, as their chemistry was bad. The Newton brothers talk about what the plan is on pulling off their next bank heist, and they perform it as well as another bank, and I swear I don't believe they learned a damn thing as far as getting a job versus the robbing a bank goes. And this is starting to annoy me. An ignorant elderly man gets in the middle of where the robberies are happening after Joe tried to warn him, but he's too stupid as it is by walking in the middle of the explosions. Willis is confronted by Arthur and a couple of lawmen, including a maid, and as he gets thrown in jail with Joe. And eventually Willis tells the sheriff a confession he makes, and this is hilarious in a bad way, as it doesn't make a whole lot of sense, as I'm not engaged with this movie at this point at all. Willis confesses to Louise He's a businessman, and I can't believe his lies, and as he thinks it's okay to do that in the first place, and take it from someone who's not a very good liar in my experience. They continuously rob the bank after bank. At this point, I'm bored with this movie at this point, and I'm almost 50 minutes into it, and I can't believe it's that bad. As we move on to 1923, so I was right, okay. And we get a couple of people wanting a desperately capture the Newton brothers, while Willis is confronted by an old partner whom I never got his name, and I don't really care, as I'm not caring for this film to the point my attention was kind of half on the movie. Louise chats with Willis, and she figured out he lied to her from the very beginning, and I'm shouting at the screen like, leave his ass! Because I can't get behind any of this. And I can't believe she still is still in love with the guy. And I thought, oh my God, this can't get any worse. Oh wait, yes it can, because this movie's bad. Louise goes on the train with the Newton brothers and becomes an associate in their business. And I'm like, oh God, this better not turn into Bonnie and Clyde, but luckily it doesn't, as that's a better movie than this thing is. Willis keeps saying to Louise he's done with robbing banks, but he keeps doing it anyways, which is a terrible choice of the character to do so, and they're still robbing one bank after the next, and it goes horribly wrong as one guy won't let go of Jess's leg, and one of the officers try to stop Willis, but he gets away anyways, while they go to an oil site during the day and have a campfire at night, and Louise and Lewis leaves Willis as they keep robbing banks and meet other gangsters, for one scene after another. And I'm just tired of the movie at this point, as I'm getting restless with it, and it has no plot whatsoever, which is a shame for director Richard Linklater. We move on to June 12th, 1924, and they plan on stopping and robbing a train with Willis and Joe jumping on it, and they stop the train by pointing a gun to the conductor. They stop and take every passenger off the train, and Joe, without realizing it, shoots Doc in the face and is wounded and is hospitalized, as this movie is falling apart and I don't understand what the hell is happening at this point. Willis gets ambushed by some lawmen and is arrested and interrogated, as well as slapped around, and they catch the other while Doc is tortured by the sheriff in town, and Willis asks Louise to bring the money to the lawmen, and she shows up, and the lawmen get the money, and other lawmen capture Willis, while Louise is still there, which seems messed up, while Jess and Joe drive away, and Louise visits Willis in jail, and she tears up for him as the lawmen arrest Jess and Joe, and they have a word with each and every single Newton boy for a while, and this is the point I stopped paying attention to the movie at this point. I didn't care anymore. It's November 1924, and they get a lawyer to go to court with them, and they get put in prison in December 1924, while Jess confesses they're all guilty, and what they did was wrong, and they get thrown in jail, which was a good speech, I guess. Doc was in prison for 5 years as he died in 1968. Jess was in 9 months and he died in 1960. And Joe died in 1989 and Willis died in 1979. And credits roll to a talk show host on the TV, and we see Joe on it. And we get an interview with Willis both as it goes back and forth as elderly people. And this climax just made me crazy, as at the end of the day, I can't stand this movie anymore. Now it's time for my rating. I'll give this movie a 2.6 out of 10. I'm not a fan of westerns, and this movie proves my point on why. And I don't like the genre, but don't get me wrong, there is some good westerns out there, but unfortunately this movie isn't it, as I actively dislike the characters, as they're not interesting, nor do they ever learn a damn lesson, as that felt very irritating to me. The cinematography looked dry, as this movie was dry, as this is the least interesting film from director Richard Linklater, And from the moment the movie started, I knew that this would be as bad as it is. And there were times I watched this, because I watched this on Apple TV, there was no other streaming device that this movie was at, that the screen was acting up. And I got the impression that the movie was broken, as that bothered me for half the movie. And I can't believe this is the first bad Richard Linklater movie, as been enjoying going through his filmography until I got to this movie, as this is a solid non-recommendation as a Western, and this is not a good Western movie at the end of the day. So I'd like to thank you guys for joining me, and next time I will be back with tape. And until then, let's get on out to the sun.